After the Napoleonic Wars ended and Europe was no longer at constant war with itself, people had to pick back up the pieces and rebuild. Rebuilding, however, was no easy task. The French Revolution and the many wars that followed it had swept away many of the old systems in Europe, including many of the remnants of feudalism. The sheer violence of the revolution that took place in France turned away many monarchs from liberal ideas and back towards more traditional conservative views. That would be an important point after the Napoleonic Wars, as the new European order created during the Congress of Vienna was aimed at restoring the old order of Europe and preventing the instability that would lead to another large continental-wide war. Two exceptions to turn back towards a more conservative Europe that arose out of the Vienna Congress were France and Poland. France simply was unable to return completely to the state it was before the revolution. Too many people had died, and revolutionary liberal ideas were too embedded into the people. France, therefore, received a constitution, and promises were made to keep many of the revolutionary reforms. Those promises would not be kept, leading to trouble in the future. Poland's situation was much more complex. During the Congress of Vienna, war very nearly broke out between Russia and the rest of Europe over their desire to take over the previously Polish territory. While due to a number of other circumstances, the rest of Congress desired a more independent Poland. The compromise eventually reached would see a new Kingdom of Poland with a strong liberal constitution, independent legislature, courts, and an army. It would, however, be under Russia, with the Emperor of Russia always also being the King of Poland. While initially the new Kingdom of Poland situation was better than might otherwise have been expected, it was not sustainable long term. In 1820, the first major cracks erupted in the new European order that had been created. Liberal revolutions broke out in Spain, Portugal, and the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. In reaction, the major powers of Europe met to suppress the revolutions. A French army entered Spain to put down the revolution there and restore an absolute monarchy to the throne, while in Italy, Austrian forces were sent to crush the revolts. Portugal escaped major outside intervention and was successful in forcing the court to return from Brazil, where they had fled from Napoleon. They instituted a constitutional monarchy. Challenges to a constitutional system would arise, however, as Portugal was plunged into civil war from 1828 to 1834 that would pit the old absolutist against those who supported a more liberal constitutional monarchy. After years of struggle, the civil war would end in a liberal victory. Elsewhere, the Greek War of Independence broke out in 1821. It was a continuation of the centuries-long struggle by Greeks in resisting the Ottoman Empire, but during the War of Independence, it took on a more nationalistic character. The war would eventually end in 1829 with a Greek victory. By 1830, liberal ideas and nationalism had picked up more steam, leading to a wave of revolutions throughout Europe. In France, a July Revolution broke out in 1830, leading to an end of the Bourbon rule over France, with them being replaced by a more liberal July monarchy from the House of Orléans. The July monarchy would last until 1848, when revolution once again came to France. Taking note of the revolution underway in France at the time, revolution also broke out in Belgium, which was under Dutch control. After nearly a year of struggle and thanks to French support, Belgium would gain its independence. In Italy, a wave of revolts broke out across the peninsula in support of a unified Italy, only being successfully suppressed by the intervention of another Austrian army. Perhaps the largest event to take place in 1830, however, was the November Uprising in the Kingdom of Poland. Ever since the conclusion of the Congress of Vienna and the creation of the Kingdom of Poland, a slow but steady erosion of the freedoms Poland did have under Russia took place. The liberal constitution of Poland, which promised freedom of speech, religious tolerance, an independent Polish parliament, courts, army, and treasury, was increasingly ignored. The liberal-leaning Decembrist revolt in 1825 only increased Russian suspicion of anything liberal, including the Kingdom of Poland. In late 1830, the uprising was sparked by news that Russia planned on using the Polish army to put down the French and Belgian revolutions taking place, in clear violation of the Polish constitution. Prompted by this news and the apparent success of the revolutions taking place elsewhere in Europe, a group of army cadets took up arms and attacked the seat of Russian power in Warsaw. The uprising spiraled from there, with the army and much of the Polish government joining in. Unfortunately, the unplanned nature of the uprising meant that it did not immediately have a clear objective or a concrete goal. Efforts were simultaneously made to strike a deal with the Tsar and prepare for war. Ultimately, the uprising failed due to the overwhelming force of the Russian army sent into Poland and the disjointed leadership that tried to manage an uprising they were unprepared for. What the November uprising did succeed in showing was the growing popularity of liberal ideas in Europe. Poland's liberal constitution had been held up by many as an ideal that liberals should strive for. During the war, organizations in support of Poland appeared throughout Europe, especially in many German states. Governments began cracking down on such organizations, especially after Poland's defeat when many Poles fled into Germany and Western Europe. Even still, many Poles would find warm welcomes when they left their homeland. Even some countries that had not experienced revolutions or uprisings were forced to bend to the growing liberal winds, Britain and the Swiss cantons being two examples. What the events during the 1820s and 1830 highlighted above all was that the ideas of the French Revolution brought forward would not go away. Europe was changed forever. Liberal ideas and increasingly nationalism would become central to change in Europe. 1848 would be the year where no matter how much the old order tried to suppress the ever-growing liberal or nationalistic ideas, the course of history would become clear. Revolutions broke out across Europe, especially concentrated in the various German states, Austria, and in Italy. The scale of these revolutions and the widespread nature of them were unprecedented in Europe. No matter how they turned out at the time, they firmly put the future of Europe on a more liberal and nationalism-based path. Both Germany and Italy would be unified by the end of 1871, and the cracks that appeared in the Austrian Empire would eventually play a major role in its collapse. The French Revolution had not just spread war to the rest of Europe, but also many of its ideas. Despite the great resistance all the monarchs of Europe put forward in an attempt to prevent change, even uniting together on occasion to suppress liberal revolutions, they ultimately did not succeed.